of this new book called The Gypsy Game. If you enjoy, please like and subscribe. The Gypsy Game. Chapter 1. Not very much, I guess. Why? That was the first thing Melanie said when April asked her if she knew anything about gypsies. April didn't answer. A minute or so later, Melanie waved her hand in front of April's eyes and said, "Hey, anybody home? Come back to Earth." Still no answer. April just went on staring into space. They had been lying on their stomachs across the bed in April's room, digesting their Christmas dinners and talking about the presents they'd gotten each other and other Christmas stuff. Not talking all the time, but just once in a while when they felt like it. That was one of the good things about being the kind of friends they were. Sometimes when they were together, they gabbed their heads off, and sometimes not. Either way, it always felt okay. So when it took a long time for April to say why she'd asked the gypsy question, it didn't surprise Melanie all that much. She knew that when April's blue eyes got that spacey look, it usually meant she was on to something new and exciting. If you waited long enough, you were sure to hear all about it. So Melanie waited. While she waited, she had time to sit up, scratch a mosquito bite on her ankle, make a face at herself in the mirror on April's dressing table, and flop back down again. Finally, April sighed and said, "Oh, I don't know. It's just what you said about it not being the thing. Going back and doing the same things over and over. You know, all the Egyptian stuff. And just the other day, I was reading this magazine that had all this great stuff about gypsies. I was just thinking that maybe we could." She sat up, shoved back a strangle of blonde hair, grinned at Melanie, and went on. "I was thinking that maybe we could try being gypsies for a change." If Melanie wasn't too thrilled by the idea right at first, it was probably just because she was so used to being Egyptians. Remembering, she kind of sighed. April was watching with her narrowed eyes. "Well, what do you think?" Melanie rolled over on her back. "Oh, I don't know. I was just remembering things like that time Ken and Toby almost scared us to death." "Yeah, the jerks," April said, but then she grinned too. And for a moment they both just laid there giggling like a couple of idiots. But then, at the very same moment, they both quit laughing and were quiet again, thinking and remembering. No one had said anything for quite a while when there was a knock on the door, and then April's grandmother's voice saying, "Girls, Marshall is here. May he come in?" Melanie rolled her eyes, and wouldn't you know it? Wouldn't you think that for once he'd be able to entertain himself for a few minutes with all those Christmas toys and everything? But April only, she shrugged. "Okay, yeah, Master Moses, come on in," she yelled. But a second later, Melanie Ross's 4-year-old brother appeared in the doorway, looking especially solemn and dignified in his Christmas bathrobe, red and black plaid with velvet tassels on the belt. The Rosses were African Americans, and both Melanie and Marshall had satiny brown skin and elegant black eyebrows. And today, Marshall was looking even more handsome than usual. And no pear-shaped velvet octopus dangling around his neck by 2 of its 8 long legs. Melanie poked April and whispered, "See, like I told you, no security." Marshall shut the door carefully behind him, walked across the room, and climbed up on the bed, and asked in a business-like tone of voice, "What are we talking about?" April grinned. "Security," she said. "You were just saying no security." Melanie poked April again and shook her head. Marshall didn't like being teased, and he particularly hated being teased about security. As he started to climb down off the bed, his high-arched eyebrows were puckering together and his lips setting into a firm line. April grabbed him by the back of his shirt. "Come on back, Runt," she said. "I was just kidding. We weren't really talking about your precious security. We were just talking about..." She stopped and grinned at Melanie. "Well, actually, we were talking about being gypsies." Marshall looked at April suspiciously. "That's right," Melanie said. "We really were. April was just saying how maybe we could start playing a new game about being gypsies this time instead of Egyptians." "Gypsies?" Marshall's frown had returned. "Do gypsies have pharaohs? I like being Marsh and Moses." "But you'd like being a gypsy too," Melanie said. "You'd really like, well, doing all the gypsy things." "Tell him, April. Tell him why he'd like being a gypsy." Okay, April said. "Listen, Marshall. Gypsies are people who go around in caravans. A caravan is like, almost like a house trailer, only made of wood and pulled by horses. Or at least they used to be." "Horses?" Marshall's forehead began to unpucker. Marshall, who had lived all his life in a city apartment where most pets weren't allowed, had this thing about all kinds of animals, particularly big animals. "That's right, horses." April thought a minute. And some gypsies train bears. That's how they make their living. They have trained bears who dance and do all kinds of tricks. And people pay money to watch the bears. "Oh, yeah?" Marshall's face was lighting up like neon, when suddenly his eyes narrowed and a smile went out. "Bears?" he asked suspiciously. "Real bears, Melanie?" Melanie nodded. If April said that gypsies train bears, they probably did. April had a special talent for that kind of information. Marshall quit trying to scoot off the bed and sat back down between April and Melanie. He crossed his legs, smoothed out the front of his bathrobe, and straightened the velvet tassels. When he was all arranged, he said, "Okay, let's be just gypsies. When do we get to train the bears?" April rolled her eyes at Melanie and grinned. Melanie grinned back. "Okay," she said. "Bears." She got up and grabbed a pencil and a notebook off April's desk. It was a notebook they always took to their Egyptian business meetings to take notes about what they were going to do next and what kind of stuff they needed to bring the next time they went to Egypt. Turning to a new page, Melanie began to write. When she finished writing, she showed her page to Marshall. "See," she said, "it says here, bears. Get bears for the gypsy game." She wiggled her eyebrows at April. Marshall nodded approvingly. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's be gypsies. I get the first bear." He thought for a moment, his forehead wrinkling. Where do you get the bears?" The girls laughed. "Yeah," Melanie said. "Good question, Marshall." She looked at April and made her face say, "What do we do now?" "Well..." April nodded thoughtfully. "Oh yes, I guess the first thing we have to do now is go to the library." Yes. Marshall's eyes rounded in amazement. "They have bears at the library?" That really cracked them up. By the time they stopped laughing, Marshall was mad again. He didn't like being laughed at. His lower lip was sticking out, and his forehead had started to pucker. "No, Marshall," April finally gasped. They don't have bears at the library, but we can find out about them there. About bears and gypsies and all that stuff. Marshall slid down off the bed. Okay, he said. Let's go. Right now. Of course, they don't go right now, because libraries aren't open on Christmas Day. But before Melanie and Marshall went home that evening, it was all planned. On Thursday afternoon, April would go down to the Ross's apartment and get Melanie and Marshall. And then they would stop by to see if Elizabeth wanted to go too. April wrote it down in her notebook. Gypsies, 2 p.m. Thursday. Ask Elizabeth. But what about Ken and Toby? Melanie asked. Shouldn't we ask them if they want to be gypsies? I mean, if we don't even ask, there's bound to be trouble. April grinned happily. Yeah, I know, she said. Look out, Toby. Here comes trouble. Actually, right at that moment, if anyone had asked Melanie what kind of trouble April was talking about, she probably would have said that April meant herself. That Toby was going to have April trouble. But afterward, remembering exactly what April said that day, it occurred to Melanie that it was almost as if April had been doing the oracle thing again. As if she looked into the future and see this big dark cloud of trouble heading in Toby's direction. Except that back then on Christmas afternoon, not even a real oracle could have guessed how much or how really weird the trouble was going to be. And that is one chapter. Come back tomorrow and I will read the next chapter. Thank you for watching. And as I said, if you enjoy, please like and subscribe. It would help me a lot. Bye, guys. Oh, and remember, comment your favorite emoji to be in my next notification squad. Bye.